The Christian scriptures are littered with names and stories of people who make it into our everyday expressions. People like Noah, Adam and Eve, David and Goliath, the Good Samaritan. But in amongst these popularly known stories, there are hundreds of micro stories. People who've made it into the big book, but they're hidden away. One of those people is a man born 3,000 years ago at the time of King David. His name is Mephibosheth. To understand Mephibosheth's story, we have to understand a little bit of King David's story. David wasn't actually born in a royal line at all. In fact, the king before him was Israel's first ever king. There were no family lines. King Saul had it all going on. I mean, he's tall, he's handsome, he's strong, he's rich. He's like A-grade king material, but sadly his heart is quickly corrupted. So God has to begin to look for a new king. He searches the world, and the Bible describes him finding the boy David, who will be a man after God's own heart. David's not A-grade king material at the time. He's short, he's young, he's quite artistic, he's musical, he's a shepherd, for goodness sake. But he's also brave, and most importantly, he's full of faith. So God's prophet, Samuel, comes to see David as a boy, and he anoints him king. But he does it in secret. From that point on, David finds himself a servant at Saul's palace. He plays the harp for King Saul to soothe the spiritual affliction he has, but soon David becomes friends with Saul's son and heir, Jonathan. It doesn't sound like David and Jonathan's relationship's going to go well, does it? But actually it does. The two men, David and Jonathan, have a really strong, genuine love for each other. So much so that when Jonathan's dad, Saul, becomes increasingly paranoid, delusional and violent, Jonathan keeps on protecting David. Soon it becomes clear that David is going to be the next king, and Saul is trying to kill David again and again and again. One day Jonathan and David meet in secret in a field, and they have to say, look, it's become too dangerous for us to continue this friendship, and they have to part ways, but not before they make a promise to each other. They promise that they will look after each other's family. That promise is going to linger in the air for the rest of David's life. Eventually, King Saul and Jonathan are both killed in battle, and this is a really big moment in the story, because what normally happens in that culture is that the winning side, King David's side, then sweep into Saul's palace and kill all of the remaining family members of the opposing king, King Saul. But King David's not like that. But they don't know that. So a nurse who's there looking after Jonathan's young boy picks that boy up to get him to safety, and in her panic she's running out of the palace and she drops him. She breaks his legs and she renders him crippled for life. That boy is Mephibosheth. The Bible tells us that one day, after being king for a number of years, King David asks the question, is there anyone from Saul's family still alive? Anyone I can show kindness to for Jonathan's sake? For the sake of that promise. Here's where a man called Ziba enters the story. Ziba used to be the servant to Saul, and he's still working in the palace. He doesn't like David at all, and he tells David about Mephibosheth and where to find him, and David sends for him. Mephibosheth has been literally living in the middle of nowhere. He's terrified for his life, his whole life. And when a chariot turns up to take him to the palace, he thinks he's done for. So on his arrival, he throws himself down on the floor. But David says to him, there's no need for you to fear. I promised your dad, Jonathan, that I would show kindness to his family. and you're all that's left. So I'm going to return to you all of your family property, all the property your grandfather Saul had, and I want you to eat here at my table as one of my own sons as long as you live. Obviously, Mephibosheth is unable to walk, so he can't work the land. So David calls in this man Ziba, the servant who's been a servant for both kings, and he commissions him and his family that instead of being servants in the royal palace, they're now going to be farmers. They're going to work the land for Mephibosheth. I mean, it was unheard of for a king to have anyone imperfect in his palace. People with disabilities at that time were seen as cursed. But David has Mephibosheth at his table for the next few years. He doesn't have to do it, but he's promised to be kind. The thing about acts of kindness is they tend to come full circle. Years later, things are really falling apart between Mephibosheth and Ziba, who's working his land as a farmer. Initially, Ziba lies to David. He tells him that Mephibosheth is plotting to take back the kingdom for his grandfather Saul. This makes David really sad. But what David does is he gives all that farmland that Ziba's been working to Ziba and his family. Ella! Then a lot happens. Eventually, months later, David gets back to Jerusalem and he meets Mephibosheth again. Now, this is his second opportunity to have Mephibosheth killed. After all, he thinks Mephibosheth has been plotting to take over the kingdom. But when he meets Mephibosheth, there's been no one to look after him. His crippled feet are unwashed and unbound. His beard needs trimming, and he hasn't even been able to wash his clothes. David says to him, "What is going on?" He tells David of Ziba's lie. This is where David does his second act of kindness. Now, by all rights, he should have taken the land back from Ziba, and he should have given it back to Mephibosheth, and he even should have had Ziba executed. But instead he says, "Here's what we'll do. Let's stop all this fighting. Let's just divide the land up. Let's give half to Ziba and half to you." And this is what Mephibosheth says. This is where David's kindness to Mephibosheth comes full circle. And Mephibosheth says, "It's enough for me to sit at your table as one of your children. I want you to give all of my land to Ziba." Mephibosheth is honouring Ziba's years of service to his grandfather, even though he's been plotting against him. He's repaying evil with kindness, and the whole situation just evaporates. Two extraordinary acts of kindness, doing things for each other that the people involved could just never have done for themselves. That's the power of kindness. It escalates, like ripples in a pond that grow bigger instead of getting smaller. Who do you know that needs an act of kindness today? Someone you can do something good for, something they couldn't have done for themselves, something that will help them or brighten their day, or something that gets them through a situation or provides for a need they have, something that offers them a worth, gives them a treat they're not expecting. Maybe there's a person who hasn't got a home that you walk past every day. Could you learn their name and say hello to them every morning when you go past? You know someone who's alone and you can ask them to go for a walk with you or see a movie with you and some friends. Maybe there's someone sick who needs treats. This Christmas, could you be a mystery Santa for someone who really needs a present? Doesn't God delight in doing that for us? What's he provided for us? I mean, in so many ways we're all Mephibosheths. There's no way we should be invited to the king's table as one of his own children, but that's exactly what he's done for us all. The very start of John's Gospel says this: "To all who believed, He gave the right to be called the children of God. And that is what we are. If that's how God is flowing with kindness towards us, then we need to do the same. So, Father God, would you open up our eyes to see the people around us that you want us to show kindness to. May we see and act. May we grow into a habit of kindness. Help us to recognize that kindness can be so much more than just a few nice things. True kindness can be life-changing for people. And may your Jesus culture blossom as we freely bless and transform those around us without condition and without any expectation of return. And may your goodness, your kindness to us go full circle.